questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hassold. I thank all the witnesses for the testimony. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes for questioning. Mr. Wessel, Ms. Van Cleave, and Mr. Hassold, I think these questions will go to you. Is it fair to say that the open and collaborative nature of U.S. academic institutions make them inherently vulnerable to the threat of foreign exfiltration? And if so, how do we strike that balance in protecting our research and our systems while ensuring collaboration? Mr. Wessel, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, as I pointed out in my testimony, we can identify what some of the high-value targets are and focus on those first, so that we can look at critical areas of research that relate not only to the economic domain, but China's national security desires, other countries' national security desires. One can do a gap analysis to determine whether, for example, China needs hot engine technology to be able to develop jet engines for their fighters. We can then net back and look at some of those cooperative research programs, the labs here in the U.S. that are doing work with cleared defense contractors or doing it on their own, and try and upscale what the systems in place are to ensure that our systems are secure, to assess foreign students who are part of those labs and make sure we're doing better analysis of their visas and the connections they have, and to try and track where the information may not be going. So it's threat analysis and using that to try and identify gaps and go forward. We also have a lot more to do beyond that.
Ms. Van Cleave?
Mr. Chairman, clearly the academic community, as you describe it, as open and free, and having the values that it has to try to have free exchange of ideas and interaction of all peoples, and that's the way to advance our knowledge and understanding. It is very rich. It is very rich in creative people. It is very rich in people who are going to have significant relationships with other creative people throughout the country. And so from the standpoint of a foreign intelligence service, here's an opportunity to do the basics of espionage. It is the opportunity to spot potential sources for them, to evaluate those sources, to find people who know other people that can introduce them to significant potential sources. So for an espionage service, is academia a great place to operate? Absolutely, it's a great place to operate. My point, my principal point to you is to say, look, yes, we need to have awareness, and awareness is significantly important. And the more that all Americans can understand the extent to which they don't want to be taken advantage of by foreign actors, that is excellent. But we have more to do as a government as well. And I think it is clear to me that the advantage lies in being able to see inside of what the Foreign Intelligence Service is after in the first place. So if we know who their people are and where they are and how they're operating, and we know they're at this university but not that university, we have the advantage to protect ourselves and to disrupt what they're doing much more effectively than if all of our eggs are on the defense basket.
Mr. Hassold, your take?
Thank you. I think from a traditional counterintelligence perspective, collaboration allows for things like source recruiting and things like my panelists previously said. But from a cyber perspective, I believe that collaboration centralizes the information that's used by universities from a research perspective that allows for a inherent risk by pooling all of the data and research into one location that can be accessed by foreign adversaries. So I think from a cyber perspective, it's more of a sense of centralizing the data and making that data more vulnerable for attackers.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wessel, in your testimony, you stated that we needed to act to preserve our own technology and confront China's predatory and protectionist actions to ensure the existence of the global commons. Has the U.S. federal government taken steps to confront this at our academic institutions? How would you suggest we confront China's actions, and what consequences do we take the appropriate action to do so?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, although that probably would take me a day or two to respond. I don't think we've done enough to send a message that both to the Chinese and other nations, but also to players here about the seriousness. As you probably recall, in May 2014, 5 PLA hackers were indicted for going into a number of our major companies here, not universities, but major companies. There's no follow-up action to that. The indictment was sealed. Those 5 PLA hackers may not be able to come to Disneyland, but they're doing quite well. So there have been few costs to the Chinese or other nations for what they're doing. You talked about indictments, et cetera. There are some one-offs. We have to do a much better job of identifying the critical technologies that China and other nations want and enhancing the safeguards around those. And as the President is doing now in terms of the theft and coercive taking of intellectual property by the Chinese, is make sure that there are sanctions that are effective and people understand that the overall framework has to change. Sanctions to respond to the illegal activities need to be upgraded. They need to be much more public. We also need to do a much better job of training those people here as to what the risks are.
Thank you. My time's up. Ms. Esty, you recognized for 5 minutes.